Over 1,000 designs of wallpaper in stock. We have everything you need. Come and visit us at 193 Fengate, Peterborough, PE1 5BH, or call us on 01733 34 58 47. Almorad Tiles, now open.
Had a car accident or an accident at work? Accident specialists are experts in no-win, no-fee accident claims. Leave the hassle to us. Our multilingual settlement experts will manage the entire claims process on your behalf, with nothing to pay up front. We provide services such as credit hire, taxi vehicles, recovery, storage and much more. For full details on our range of services and a free consultation, call us on 01733 555 774 or visit our office at 249 Lincoln Road opposite the NatWest Bank. Accident Specialists. Start your successful claim today.
There's a million choices available for dining out in Leeds.
But if you want something special, there's only one name to remember.
Mumtaz Leeds.
Relax in our newly refurbished Riverside restaurant.
Enjoy exquisite home cooking from our brand new menu. Upgrade to the Mumtaz Leeds experience.
And the price? Well, we're better value than ever before.
Mumtaz Leeds, Chadwick Street, Leeds, LS10 1PJ. Call 0113 242 4211.
Free car parking available.
अगर मूड हो मुस्तनद और मायारी देसी खाने का तो आजमाएं लिंकन रोड पर देसी रेस्टोरेंट। दिन का आगाज देसी नाश्ते के साथ हलवा पूरी, चने, निहारी, पाए, पराठा और आमलेट। हर रोज सुबह 7 बजे से दिन 1 बजे तक। एक मजेदार और स्वादिष्ट लंच के लिए कबाब, सैंडविच, तंदूरी डिशेस, बल्ती डिशेस, बिरयानी और बहुत कुछ। दिन 1 बजे से शाम 5 बजे तक हमारी खास डिशेस, देसी तवा या हमारी ताज़ा हांडी, 1 kg बेबी चिकन, लैम का गोश्त हड्डी के साथ ऑर्डर पर तैयार कराएं। ईट इनसाइड, टेक वे के लिए फ्री डिलीवरी। पूरा मेन्यू देखने के लिए और ऑनलाइन ऑर्डर करने के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट पे जाएं desirestaurant.co.uk। 60 नशिस्तों की गुंजाइश के साथ और एक प्राइवेट फंक्शन रूम, कैटरिंग सर्विस भी दस्तयाब। डोंट फॉरगेट देसी रेस्टोरेंट, 298 लिंकन रोड, पीटरब्रो, PE1 2ND। कॉन्टैक्ट नंबर 555795।
Broadcasting 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. This is Salam Radio.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Doctor Shabina Asad Kiyum for Salam Radio 106.2 FM in Peterborough. Now, I've been blown away as I walked in, but I have to tell you about this a little bit later. Before I tell you a little bit about Salam Radio, this is the Body, Health and Mind show on Salam Radio 106.2 FM. We are Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and also we are available on FM radio. And if you've got the Salam Radio app, you're more than welcome to tune in. I am Dr. Shabina Asad Kiyum, a local GP here within Peterborough. Absolutely delighted to have your company today for another fabulous informative pack show. And I just want to say, as I walked in today, I had the biggest surprise because I have Aliyah, who is our fabulous station manager, Sister Michelle's daughter. I'm going to hold this up to the camera so that you can all see. Hopefully, you'll be able to see this. And she's made this drawing of me. So I'm so pleased because it fits my description. You know, the whole hair, the snazzy look, the colours, and I'm just so honoured. So she's actually qualified for the shout out on my show. So here's to Aliyah. Thank you very much for this. And I'm so admirable of her artwork. She's a very talented little girl. So Aliyah, thank you very much indeed. Now, moving on, I'm joined by a very special guest today who I take great pride in introducing, and her name is Dr. Ruqia Zafar. She's been practicing locally as a GP for the last 6 years. She's Peterborough born and bred, so she is from within our great city. She completed her medical degree at the University of Leicester. And then she went to work in various specialities in Leicester and Kettering before commencing her GP training in Peterborough, over here in the city. Now, since qualifying, Dr. Ruqia has really enjoyed the breadth of experience that general practice has to offer, yet feels that there's an ever-increasing burden of chronic disease and poor patient outcomes, which requires a new approach. And this is what we were talking about before the show. And this then developed her interest in functional medicine and nutrition as a systems and root cause-based model that has the potential to reverse chronic disease epidemics and improve patient outcomes. Now, she's completed the Institute of Functional Medicine's world-renowned AFMCP course and followed this up with further training in cardiometabolic and hormonal health. She's also trained in the emerging fields of nutrigenetics, which I shall be asking her about, and epigenetics. She is continuing further studies in nutrition at the College of Naturopathic Medicine in London. Excuse me. Oops. She continues to work as an NHS GP as well as running her private clinic in functional medicine. Dr. Ruqia, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
It's
Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute privilege to have you on board because I've read all of that about you and I'm absolutely blown away. And each time I read that about you, I really have to go back in and think, wow. So, first of all, Dr. Ruqia, would you like to tell us a little bit about what developed your interest in this particular field, naturopathic functional medicine? What happened?
I think that's a long story, actually. And I can't say it was one thing that made me think, okay, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe 6 years ago, I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
So, I think as I finished, when you're training as a GP or just generally training as a doctor, you're so focused on getting done what you need to get done, and the training is so intense that you're not really thinking deeply or asking questions. And I think once the training had been completed and there I was on my own seeing patients every day, I think a few questions started popping up.
Sure.
Particularly, I was seeing some patients who would come in with, a whole load of diagnoses on their, the medical record goes on forever. And other patients in their 70s with really not much at all. And you ask yourself, what is it about this patient that makes them so sick? And, in their 40s, they're this unwell. And then there are other patients who are in their 70s really doing well.
Yeah.
The other thing I was finding was once you started a patient on a medication for one condition, it seemed like a very slippery slope to needing more and more medications. And I think I've always had this sense of I've never been keen on drugs, which is strange as a doctor, which is probably why I came into general practice actually, as opposed to any other speciality, because in general practice we're a little bit more holistic, I think.
Yeah.
And we're not looking at just what medications I can give this patient. At least that's the idea.
Yeah.
We're looking at patients, holistically, their whole lives, what's happening for them socially, etc. So that was the other thing that made me think, okay, well, maybe we need what is it about putting people on medications that then seems to lead them down this slippery slope where they're needing more and more and more, and yet they're not feeling any better. In fact, often feeling sicker. And so I had all these questions that were going on in my mind. And then a friend of mine who I would say, I think I would call her a hippie in lots of ways. So she sent me this link to an online, I guess you could call it a conference on autoimmune disease.
Okay.
And but treating from a completely different perspective to what I'm used to. And they were talking about putting diseases like rheumatoid arthritis into remission completely.
Oh.
Or, things that we think are once you've got them, you've got them. You need drugs to maintain the disease or manage the symptoms, but there's not a lot you can do to get rid of it. And over time they will progress. And at most what the drugs do is reduce the rate at which the progression happens. And they were talking about just people coming off medications and feeling completely better, and it was just shocking to me. But what was even more shocking was, you get lots of people who might claim these things, but actually it seemed like everything they were claiming was backed by studies. It was science-based. They knew their biochemistry and physiology inside out. And it made me think, okay, well, what is this medicine? And that's how I was introduced to functional medicine. And I think then I just started experimenting with it in some ways, I guess. So we did this, a group of us did a detox plan where we cut out sort of inflammatory foods, took a few supplements but not many, introduced exercise daily, and it was just for 10 days, and it was amazing how much better people were feeling and looking in 10 days. And then I thought, maybe there's something in this, and that was it. I've never looked back. After that, I've just been on one course after another, And finally, this year, committed myself to actually starting a clinic.
That's amazing. And you know, that can be quite a big step, because as doctors, and when you develop your own little speciality, for example, being a general practitioner, you can be so set in your ways about things that it can often be quite daunting stepping out of your comfort and safety zone, and then to take the decision that actually, no, this is it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Must have been a difficult decision to make.
It was scary. It was definitely scary. But I think, I'll tell you one of the stories that kept coming back to me, or something I'd heard that kept back to me that made me think, no, you need to do this.
Yeah.
Someone I know, a colleague, said her dad had really severe ulcerative colitis.
Oh dear.
And they had tried everything that could be tried. And it got to the point where they said, you need to have surgery. And he didn't want surgery. Obviously, who wants a stoma? And he was fairly young at the time. So he decided that wasn't acceptable to him, and he was going to look at alternatives himself.
Yeah.
So all he did was he gave up smoking. He changed his diet to a plant-based diet, started eating organic. And he said his symptoms went into remission with no drugs.
Wow.
And they had tried everything they could think of for this guy. Now imagine that guy hadn't looked into it himself, and he would have had surgery and all the consequences of that, and a lifelong dependency on the NHS. So, and she said, this was the thing that got me. She said, so he went to see his GP to tell him how he had done this. And she said the GP wasn't interested.
Oh my God.
And he wanted to tell the GP so he could help other patients with it.
Yeah.
And the GP wasn't interested. And I thought, I don't want to be that doctor who's not interested.
Of course.
In something that could change people's lives entirely just because it doesn't fit with my paradigm at the moment.
Yes.
I wanted to listen. And I think that just reminding myself of that kept pushing me. No, if this is what you think would work for people, you need to do it. It doesn't matter what your colleagues think. It doesn't matter how hard it is to leave the NHS. Just do it. And I haven't left the NHS because I'm still locuming. But taking that leap and investing the money and the time into it was scary, but so far has been so worth it.
That's amazing. And I'm so admirable of this fact that what comes to me in the form of a message from you is exactly what you train to be. So as a GP, you are trained to be holistic in your approach. There is no set way. There's no textbook that tells us how to do it properly. I know we've got Roger Neighbours, ways of consulting, etc., with the ideas, concerns and expectations. However, there is no set way that tells us how to do it properly. And actually, yes, we have an awful lot to negotiate when we are general practitioners. There's an awful lot of responsibility placed upon us. And it is fulfilling the patient's need. And if part of that is incorporating this line of medicine that you're talking about, then you've achieved your goal, because you have a happy patient and you've addressed that holistic approach, really, because you're sort of addressing their quality of life, how their illness is affecting them, and what to do as well with regards to... And health promotion advice has always been a part of the GP consultation.
Definitely.
But however we address it. Now, I was very interested when you said that this gentleman obviously had ulcerative colitis. And I remember when we do placements, I did the placement of rheumatology. That is where I first learnt that anybody that is diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and for purposes of clarity for our listeners, rheumatoid arthritis is the destructive type of arthritis. And it's non-reversible. It's a non-reversible process. And we are advised that the best treatment for rheumatoid arthritis would be to initiate patients on disease-modifying drugs, which are the immunomodulators, such as methotrexate and the really sort of, immunocompromising drugs. But obviously there's a different approach with naturopathic medicine.
Again, this is one of the reasons, another one of the reasons why functional medicine appeals to me so much is when someone comes in with a disease like that, they need help. And if what we're offering them is drugs, sometimes it's, absolutely essential that they do go on the drugs. For example, if someone's having a heart attack, I'm not going to be telling them to hold off on the drugs. They need them at that time. But I think sometimes the drugs are like a sledgehammer approach.
Yes.
And I feel that there's a lot more that we can do before we go to the drugs. Not only that, but actually, should we have caught these patients with rheumatoid arthritis way before they even started getting signs and symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis. And I think this is where functional medicine is different, because in conventional medicine, a patient comes to you with certain signs and certain symptoms. So symptoms are what they're complaining of, signs are what we can see. So we kind of put those signs and symptoms together and organize them into what we would call a disease, right? But what is a disease? A disease is name we've given to a collection of symptoms. But as a functional medicine practitioner, that's just the beginning. You know, identifying the disease is just the beginning. And actually what the disease is isn't really the question for someone who's practicing functional medicine. The question for us are why? Why is it happening? Why does this patient have rheumatoid arthritis? And often, you know, you'll see it. You'll have patients who've been presenting with aches and pains, but all their blood tests and inflammatory markers have been coming back as normal for years. And then at some point, it gets to the point where the inflammatory markers are up and the rheumatoid factor is positive, and then you send them off to the rheumatologist and they're diagnosed. But perhaps we should have taken that patient's signs and symptoms a bit more seriously early on and done something to modify the disease process there. Now, in conventional medicine, often we don't have anything at that stage, but in functional medicine, we absolutely do.
That's amazing to know.
Yeah, and I think, again, functional medicine, the focus of it, a lot of it is on prevention. So we want to catch people early. We want to stop them before they become a pre-diabetic, not just a diabetic, you know.
That's right.
We want to think about, because another thing we have to remember is you are not a healthy person one day and someone with a disease the next. It's a spectrum, you know. Something's happening for years, sometimes decades, before you get to the point where you have a disease.
Yeah.
So it's a diabetic, for example, you know, not one day perfect blood sugars and the next day you're a diabetic. Something's happened over time.
Yeah.
And now we recognize that by categorizing people into the pre-diabetic category, for example. But even before then, they have insulin resistance. So if we can pick people up who are at risk of becoming insulin resistant and intervene there, we can prevent them from getting to the point of becoming a diabetic.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And Dr. Ruqia, the reason why I'm having 1,000 questions pop up into my head as we are having this chat, because I've had very many consultants come onto this show. A lot of them are cardiologists, a lot of them have been neurologists, and the thing that's been consistent is the prevalence of chronic disease or illness, especially diabetes and heart disease, within our Asian ethnic minorities. And I was once told by a cardiologist that sort of stuck in my mind that even if we are the healthiest beings on the planet and we follow a strict diet regimen, we still have, through genetics and through our demographics, a 20% probability of developing heart disease at some point. But you're absolutely right that we're not equipped with the skills or the knowledge to help implement that preventative process. So would you say that it would be wise for people, especially the Asian demographic, to see professionals such as yourself to give them that very much needed advice before the harm actually occurs, because we know we're at risk by virtue of our genetics, aren't we?
Yep, definitely. I think the really important thing is to educate yourself. And there's so much out there. I mean, if you're going to the internet, just stick with the credible sources, but there's so much out there on diet and nutrition and exercise, and everybody should be thinking about what can I do to prevent myself developing certain diseases. But the interesting question really is, so genetics, our genes haven't changed. It takes millions of years for our genes to change.
Sure.
So why is it that, say, our grandparents' generation weren't as sick as
we are? Yeah.
Or, I mean, our parents, their generation was sicker than our grandparents' generation, and our generation is becoming sicker than our parents' generation. Why? The genes haven't changed. What has changed? The environment has changed.
Yes.
And in functional medicine, there's this phrase we use often. They say, genes loaded the gun and the environment pulled the trigger.
Right. Oh, how interesting.
So, and this really is where epigenetics and things come in, because if genes haven't changed, something else has changed that's now making certain genes become more expressive.
Yeah.
Why is that happening? And what can we do? If we can figure out why it's happening, what can we do to change that? And this is where epigenetics and nutrigenetics come in, because nutrigenetics is about using nutrition to support the function of certain genes,
right,
or suppress the function of other genes.
Okay.
And epigenetics is that science of looking at why certain genes are turned on and others are inhibited, and the whole science around that. So functional medicine incorporates a lot of that. Now, things like, for example, if we say, let's give an example, autism.
Yes.
That's a few years ago when I was training as a GP, we had one of the local community pediatricians coming in to do a talk, like a workshop for half a day on autism. And she was talking about how the prevalence is going up at such a dramatic rate of autism. And I put my hand up and I said, so, what is the cause of autism? And she said genetic. But that didn't explain the statement she had just made. Why is the prevalence of it going up if it's a genetic condition?
Absolutely.
And, there's an argument some people use, which is that we're better at picking up, or the diagnostic category of autism must become bigger. But actually she said, and she deals with it day in and day out, she said the most severe cases that would have been picked up even decades ago, even those have increased tenfold in the last few years. Why? Something must be going on in the environment, and I can't say for sure we know what it is, but we have to ask these questions. Yes. Why? And I think with we definitely know with ischemic heart disease, with diabetes, with strokes, things like that are really prevalent in the Asian community. Genetics is a major part of it.
Yes.
But your genes are not your destiny. You can modify how those genes are expressed by changing your lifestyle. You can definitely become healthier than our grandparents were when they worked in the fields and worked hard and died in their 90s, unless it was infectious disease that killed them before. And that's the difference now. In those days, they died of an infectious disease, and these days people are dying of chronic disease. And even though life expectancy over the last century has improved, it just means that people are living longer, but it doesn't mean they're living healthier. So they're living longer with more diseases.
Yes, that's right.
And my job as a functional medicine practitioner is to help people live longer, healthier.
Yes.
So that's the difference.
I think it's so fascinating what you're saying, because it takes me back to a conversation where I have with my father, who, when we talk about these things, and I think our parents have a much more traditional approach to views that aren't often evidence-based, because we're in the profession. And they would say, well, back in the day, if we ever cooked in, for example, desi ghee or butter, nothing would happen to us back then. And you're absolutely right with lifestyle, because people had very active lifestyles. They would wake up at Fajr and their day would start at Fajr, and they would sleep with sunset. So it was a very organized way of life. And it was a very active way of life where exercise was obviously going out into the fields and doing those regular chores. However, life has become so sedentary now. And often I sort of, went to a school today, and I'm surprised at the number of something very simple is the school run, for example. It actually has become the school run because it has become vehicular. And children will sit in cars and are being taken to school rather than walking. I remember walking to school, for example, and it was probably about a mile away or 1.5 miles away. And I remember walking in the cold, but we were a lot more active. And I think that good habits are developed very early on. So that's something definitely to look at.
And I think the other aspect to the environment changing isn't even what they're eating, because yes, that's massively important. But I mean, you kind of mentioned it there, the sleep patterns. Why would sleep patterns be important? We know that an altered circadian rhythm, which is basically your night and day cycle, has massive impact on the hormones that your body's releasing, the amount of cortisol that is releasing, and that has an impact on the entire system in the body, all systems of the body. And we know the night shift workers are more likely to develop ischemic heart disease or have heart attacks. We know that. So that's really important. But the other things that have changed are things like, this is another fascinating area, is the gut microbiome, or just the general microbiome, which is the bacteria that we carry in and on our bodies. And we know we're more bacteria than we are human DNA. We carry more bacterial DNA than human DNA. Now, there was a time where bacteria were just pathogens, and they caused disease and you got rid of them. Now we're beginning to realize, and there's more and more studies coming out every day, that actually the gut flora is important in preventing disease. When there's an imbalance in gut flora, it has a huge impact on all aspects of the body, including the risk of developing autoimmune disease, the risk of developing things like anxiety and depression, the risk of developing eczema, ischemic heart disease. Now, as things, living standards got better, sanitation got better, we developed antibiotics and we started using them, and people were no longer dying of infectious diseases, but their gut flora was changing. And with that happening, chronic diseases became more prevalent. Now, we begin to realize this. Now we know that children, for example, who play less outside or are exposed to soil, etc., less, are more likely to develop asthma and allergies. And this is not something we would have imagined, a decade ago, 2 decades ago, we would have said, oh, there can be a link between what's happening in your gut and what's happening in your heart. But there absolutely is. And so, in a way, I can understand why your dad would say, well, we used to eat this stuff in Pakistan back in the day and nobody got sick then. Why are we getting sick now?
Nobody
Good question.
Had a heart attack. Yeah, nobody had a heart attack then, but every other person now has a heart attack, and they cook their curries in butter, etc., which we're trying to stop from happening.
Yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because even if I look back to, say, where my mum is from in Pakistan, the village where she's from, people are much wealthier now, so they're eating refined food, they're eating a lot more sugar, people are less active because they don't need to work in the fields, they pay people to do it for them.
That's right.
And what's happening? People in their 40s are dropping dead of a heart attack. And it's even worse there because they don't have anybody checking their blood pressure on a regular basis.
That's right.
Antibiotics are handed out like they're sweeties, even anti-TB drugs are being handed out for minor illnesses, steroids, everybody's on them. So, and the healthcare system just isn't there to support them. So often there, things are not found out until they're fatal.
That's right. And it's very sad. And I think after the break, when we talk a little bit, I'd like to talk a little bit about cancer. But I think that, what you say about the gut is very relevant. Now, I have had people, especially, and I couldn't but help think this, that whenever I had a patient who came to me who had a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome, I would always have this element of a patient sitting in front of me, and I would be getting vibes of anxiety from this patient. This patient was a lot more anxious, a lot more depressed, which led me into believing very well that the gut and the temperament and an individual's mood and mindset are very much interlinked with each other.
Yeah, and on some levels it's very obvious. When you're nervous, you get butterflies in your abdomen. Or you have to go to the toilet more before an exam or whatever else it might be. So it's very clear on that level that there is a link there. But when it comes to conditions like IBS and the link between anxiety and depression, for a long time we thought it was people who were nervous and anxious just imagining gut symptoms.
Yeah.
But it's not that they're imagining gut symptoms. It's the same underlying cause for their IBS is the same underlying cause for their anxiety and their depression.
Wow.
And this is one of the things about functional medicine is that I don't look at a person who's got eczema and say, I can only deal with your eczema. Forget everything else. I will say, okay, eczema and anxiety and ischemic heart disease and whatever else it might be, how are they all linked? And this again, functional medicine differs from conventional medicine is that we don't separate things out into little compartments because the body is a interconnected web. And a change in one place is going to definitely have an impact on changes all over the body. So you sort the gut out and you'll find the eczema gets better.
That's amazing. So that means, obviously, with my little element of self-diagnosed IBS, I probably am going to need a consultation with yourself, which we will talk about after the show. But we've got about 5 seconds to the break, so hopefully you'll be with us and we'll be talking a little bit in more detail after the break. So don't forget to join us, listeners.
Stay tuned to Salam Radio after this short ad break.
Here at Children of Adam, we believe water wells and hand pumps are a significant step to empowering people to live their best life. A hand pump donation is an excellent form of sadaqah jariyah for loved ones, including those who have passed away. Sa'd ibn Ubadah reported, he said, O Messenger of Allah, the mother of Sa'd has died, so what is the best charity I may give on her behalf? The Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, water. Sa'd dug a well and said, this is for the mother of Sa'd. A water pump is £150. Please donate by visiting childrenofadam.net or call us on 0300 321 0032.
Yeah, so busy.
Yes,
Had a car accident or an accident at work? Accident specialists are experts in no-win, no-fee accident claims. Leave the hassle to us. Our multilingual settlement experts will manage the entire claims process on your behalf, with nothing to pay up front. We provide services such as credit hire, taxi vehicles, recovery, storage and much more. For full details on our range of services and a free consultation, call us on 01733 555 774 or visit our office at 249 Lincoln Road opposite the NatWest Bank. Accident specialists. Start your successful claim today.
Yeah.
Feel like some great tasting chicken tonight? Great meal deals, wraps, burgers and sides. We've got it all at Chicken Palace. Call and collect at 302 Lincoln Road on 01733 702 447 or 8 Park Road on 01733 343750. Chicken Palace, open 11 a.m. till late.
Frozen vegetables are taken.
दोस्ता की परेशान है जरा कर है ना सारा सौदा मुक्या वा मुल्का विच पैसे भेजने हूं नहीं मार फूड वाले की फोन कड़का ते फ्री लोकल डिलीवरी कार मंगवा अलाता उथे का स्पेशल आ ओना की लबई हाइजीन च ग्रेड 5 चीजें चंगियां मियारी ते सस्तियां ते नाले ऑफर ही ऑफर और क्या ताजा गोश्त ताजी सब्जियां ते फ्रूट आटा चावल दालां मसाले ते जूस सारे बिल जमा करने गैस ते इलेक्ट्रिक ने टॉप अप भी करने पाकिस्तान पैसे बिल्कुल फ्री भेजने मतलब के एक चिड़ी ने दूध छड़ी ते हर शय लबनी उठा जने ने आप उतरा
Amar Food Store and Halal Meat 613B Lincoln Road Peterborough telephone 01733 687374
zinc. You know, you're not going to be able to certain enzymes.
Tired of going to the butchers for your halal meat? Haji Baba is now open in Asda. We've been in Asda for over 10 years with over 45 counters nationwide. Come to us for better packaging, variety and great quality. Chicken breast, cubes or mince, only $3.99 a kilo. Lamb or sheep leg, shoulder or mixed for only $6.99 a kilo. Baby chickens only $1.99. All your halal meat and grocery needs under one roof. Haji Baba Halal Meat. Find us in Asda.
I've been ungrateful for much my life. I wasn't faithful for all this time. I feel ashamed, Lord, for the things I've done since I've been falling all this time.
If you want to learn about Islam and Muslims, stay tuned to Salam Radio 106.2 FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back with Dr. Ruqia Zafar. And I've just been having such a fascinating conversation with Dr. Ruqia during the break that I completely carried away and didn't realise that the break had finished. Just before the break, we were talking a little bit about the gut, and I was sharing with Dr. Ruqia. It's such a fascinating show. I really hope that you're all tuned in and listening, and please do send your questions through because it's absolutely fascinating what I'm talking to her about. And I wanted to share something with you. This was something that just came into my mind. When I had our fourth child, I felt very sleepy, very lethargic. My husband, obviously being an ENT, said, I think you're hypothyroid. And I had my thyroid function test done, and actually I was found to have an underactive thyroid. And I started taking levothyroxine, which is a thyroid supplement, for those of you who don't know, to try and perk up my levels. And I took it absolutely by the book. And my levels were okay, but I would still feel so drawn out. And we were living in Carlisle, and at that time I had a lot of time on my hands. And I started looking into natural things. And I think the reason why I looked into that was I was seeing an awful lot of patients who were diagnosed with cancer, and I came across a program one day which actually got me thinking. And they were talking about the fact, exactly what you've said, Dr. Ruqia, that there isn't enough in the way of prevention. So if we have a look at all these cancer treatments, we've got these chemotherapeutic drugs, we now have what you call immunosuppression and immunotherapy as well, which is being trialled in America. However, all the funding goes into research for treatment. Hardly any funding goes into prevention. And that was something that I really wanted to find out. And many questions were asked. And at that time, unfortunately, I lost a few family members to cancer. And I was so determined to find out what's going on. And from my limited knowledge and whatever I remembered at the time, it was sort of about the fact that there are cells in the bodies that undergo mutation of some sort. Yeah. And it can be triggered off by sometimes an inflammatory reaction or because there is a known risk factor, and some of it, or virus. And what it was that so what it was that we sort of spoke. I was sort of looking at this, and I found out that there were so many things that we needed to avoid. So for one thing, for example, was I was hypothyroid at the time, and this talk involved the fact that most of Britain's soil is deplete of natural iodine. That was what we'd heard. I'd read into this. So what do you do? So most of our salt, which is table salt, which is used in cooking, is deplete of iodine. Yep. And there are so many people who are now hypothyroid. So nearly every 1 in 4, 1 in 7 people is now diagnosed as a hypothyroid within the United Kingdom. So anything that grows in those soils naturally is depleted of iodine. But what do they supplement the soil with? And it was either boric acid or something that has the same molecular weight as iodine, which comes and attaches itself onto the thyroid gland. Yep. And hence, people then have an underactive thyroid. So I started looking into this and turned completely organic. I stopped taking sugar. I have a very sweet tooth, so I sort of painstakingly started to use honey instead of sugar, which was a great sacrifice for me. And then I looked into things like organic kelp, organic spinach, and I would use Himalayan pink salt or rock salt or sea salt, actually, more. And one day I realized I actually feel really good in myself, and this was just me trialing this for 3 months. And once I said I felt good in myself, I decided, and I know I should have done this without the advice of a doctor, I stopped taking my levothyroxine, but my good health carried on. And after 6 months I met my GP and I said, I haven't been on my thyroxine for 6 months, would you mind taking blood tests? And they did, and hey presto, my thyroid levels were normal. They have been throughout. So I believe it works. It's amazing. And this was just through self-research, and I wanted to share that with you.
I'm really glad you did, because I think this is a really important point. Often, I mean, with the functional medicine world, there's a few figures that are well known, and nearly every single one of them has been through some sort of health crisis themselves. And that's what made them, and found that the way they were practicing medicine just wasn't working for them, or had a close family member who's been through something. And that's made them think, actually, maybe there's another way.
Yes.
And, you know, we see patients all the time who are hypothyroid. What do? We bung them on some levothyroxine, as you were. But actually, if the patient is deficient in iodine, iodine isn't needed just for the thyroid. It's needed for breast tissue. If you're a man, it's needed for the prostate. It's needed for stomach and various other tissues in the body. If someone comes in hypothyroid, and they're hypothyroid because their iodine levels are low, but nobody checks those in the NHS, they just get the levothyroxine. Now, you're doing something to replace the underactive thyroid's job. But what are you doing for the breast and the stomach and the rest of the tissues that are using iodine? Nothing. And so over time, that patient, those tissues are going to start developing issues. And I think this one is, you know, really is one that I remember really well, is because when I first started becoming interested in functional medicine, I have a mentor in London. I went down to her clinic, and she had a young lady who'd been diagnosed with breast cancer twice and treated for it successfully twice. But the interesting thing was there were 2 different types of tumours that she'd had. So it wasn't a recurrence of the same cancer. It was a different type of cancer.
Right.
And she was also hypothyroid and was being on levothyroxine. I would never have linked the two. My mentor, who's been practicing this type of medicine for 18 years, said, well, maybe there's something in, but the fact that maybe perhaps it's your iodine that's the issue, and checked it, and guess what? Iodine was rock bottom. Wow. And it needed treating. And I think when you say start treating, as I was saying, those correlation of signs and symptoms, the collection of signs and symptoms, rather than the cause behind the signs and symptoms, the root cause, or sometimes we call it the upstream cause. You're going to fix one thing perhaps, or at least cover up the symptoms of it, but you're not going to make the person well, and actually you're risking something else going wrong somewhere else.
Yes.
And as you say, simple changes can make a huge difference and have a huge impact. And sometimes, I was talking to you about this before the show actually started, about my patient that I saw recently with a number of conditions, and he is on, or was on, 8 or 9 different drugs, and he knew they were making him feel unwell, and he didn't want to be on them, but his GP had said you need to be on all of them for life, because they'll stop you having a heart attack and a stroke, etc., etc. And so he came to see me because he thought I'm able to help him come off some of them. And when people come in to see me, I get them to fill in a very extensive questionnaire on all their symptoms. So it's not like when we have a 10-minute consultation with a GP and you say, I can only deal with one thing at a time. I ask about everything. So when he filled it in, even though he hadn't mentioned it, he had a lot of gut symptoms. And I thought, whatever else I do for any other part of his body, it's not going to have an impact because his gut just isn't absorbing the nutrients that it needs to absorb. So my initial plan was to put him on a diet for the gut. And once the gut had healed, then I could start doing something about the high blood pressure and the ischemic heart disease. And then perhaps we can start taking him off his medications. So I focused entirely on the gut. That was my plan initially. 4 weeks later, he emailed to me to say he's reduced one medication, has come off another, has plans to come off a third one in another couple of weeks, a fourth one in another month.
Wow.
And I thought, I hadn't even looked at those medications really. I was just healing the gut. What I was doing there by changing his diet was actually healing the root cause, because disease is like a tree. At the roots of it, you have a diet and lifestyle, you have emotional and psychosocial and spiritual, you have environmental toxins, etc. And then so those are the roots. And then the trunk is the next step, is actually your beliefs, your attitudes, spirituality. Goes through that. And then further up the trunk, you get the, we call them systems, but actually not in the typical way that we normally think of systems in the body. We talk about detoxification system or the elimination system. So that would be the gut and the skin that gets rid of toxins, etc. And it goes through that. If those are functioning, you might be able to deal with the toxins you're exposed to. But if those become compromised because of chronic exposure, then you start getting the signs and symptoms. So the signs and symptoms are way up here. What I'm dealing with is way down there. And sometimes people can come up with signs and symptoms, and I don't know what the disease is. But if I fix the root causes and just focus on them, often those the signs and symptoms that I can't even identify as a particular disease will get better.
That's amazing.
And that makes it so rewarding, because we have so many people with unexplained symptoms. We call them medically unexplained symptoms or functional symptoms. And I think sometimes there can be this idea within the medical profession that if you can't explain them medically, they're in the patient's head. They're not in the patient's head, they're real. We just haven't identified the cause yet, and we haven't been able to treat them.
That's right. And like you say, we've already spoken quite a bit about sort of emotional well-being and mental health, which can often be linked or triggered to something that's going on physically.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Ruqia, what are your thoughts on naturopathic implementation of a good diet or lifestyle adaptation and prevention of cancer? Now, cancer is the word that we were all very worried about. The C word. Everybody is absolutely petrified. It doesn't choose its victims. What are your thoughts on that?
You're right. It's something everybody's petrified of, and it's so common now. I remember when I was in medical school, one of the lecturers pointed to the full lecture. I think there was 300 people in there, and he said, 1 in every 3 of you will get cancer. And that was a shock. And those figures are just going up and up. In terms of preventing it, I think one of the things we have to recognize is when we're looking at disease as a interaction between your genes, your environment, and your particular lifestyle, it means that every person is unique. So people's causes of cancer are going to be unique. But there are some things I think that we can do that are going to be beneficial for all of us. One thing I would say is, as far as possible, eat organic, because we know that a lot of the chemicals that are sprayed and pesticides that are sprayed onto our food are disease causing. And often the idea is, well, they cause disease in large amounts, but you have no evidence that they cause disease in smaller amounts. But to me, it's common sense. If they cause disease in large amounts, it's like poison. You're not going to give somebody small amounts of poison because small amounts are all right.
Yeah.
We don't know that. We don't know how this person's unique biochemistry is going to react to that particular poison. So I would say eat organic. And I understand eating organic is more expensive.
Yeah.
It does add to your grocery bill. And I think in that case, if you're struggling to eat organic fully, you can Google this. It's called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen.
Ooh.
And yes.
Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. Wow.
And it tells you, it's produced by the, I think it's called the Environmental Working Group in the US. And basically they come up with a group of fruit and veg and foods that are fairly safe to eat even if they're not organic. And then the Dirty Dozen contain huge amounts of pesticides, etc.
Wow.
And those are the ones that you want to, if you're only going to pick some food to be organic, those are the ones you want to get organic.
Okay.
And the list does change every year because they actually measure the amount of pesticides in the food and then decide which one's going to be on which list. So I think every 3 years they change the list. The last time came out this year, actually. So you can Google that and find it. So that's one thing, eat organic. The other thing is we know that cancer cells feed off of sugar.
Oh, yes, yes.
So that, again, if you can cut out sugar, great. It's going to be a thing that you do not just for your cancer risk or the risk of cancer reoccurring if you've had cancer already, but actually a whole load of other things. You know, your risk of diabetes, your risk of even hypertension, heart disease, all sorts of things. Skin condition, acne, all of it is going to have a huge impact. If you feel like you can't cut out the sugar, then I would say reduce it. So if you can have it once a week as a treat, then do that. Even if that's difficult for you, just put yourself onto a plan where you aim to improve. And if it means just 1 day a week for now, where you're sugar-free, then do that for now. And then just build up. The other thing I would say is things we don't think about actually in terms of toxin exposures is what we're putting on our bodies in terms of cosmetics, lotions, the shampoos we're using, etc., etc.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so talk about this.
So if you think about the skin, we usually think of it as a barrier, right? Keeps in what should be kept in and keeps out what should be kept out. Now, if you're putting onto your skin, but we know that the skin has a massive ability to absorb. And you can sometimes absorb medications through your skin. You can definitely absorb nutrients through your skin, but you can also absorb toxins through your skin. And let me give you one example. For example, when a lot of antiperspirants contain aluminium, huge amounts of aluminium. That's how they stop you sweating. But the problem with that is, sweating is necessary because you need to get rid of the toxins in the body through that route. But actually, the aluminium itself can cause a huge amount of problems within the body. And one of them is your risk of cancer.
Wow.
So that's something very basic that you can do. And there's a whole load of, I think people are becoming very aware of this because there's a whole load of products out there. Even Lush do like these deodorant bars now that don't contain any aluminium. And actually, they're not antiperspirants, they're just deodorants. There's a one I've come across more recently called Nude, which is NWD. And again, it's not an antiperspirant. It prevents your sweat from smelling, essentially.
Wow.
So if you have to use something, perhaps look at products like that. Good website is, I'm sure it's pronounced differently, I think it's French, but I pronounce it as Jason, and that's how it's spelled.
Okay.
Their products, look at them. They're pretty good, clean products. Another one, which is a bit more pricey because most of their products are organic, is Evolve. That's something else that you can look at.
Okay.
But actually, if you can just reduce the amount of stuff you're putting on your body, that's going to be a good start. And again, there's so much on the internet on how to make your own moisturizers. They're cheaper, they're simple to make, and they're not going to cause you all sorts of diseases down the line.
Wow.
So I think exercise, that's the other one.
Yes.
We know exercise is an anti-cancer intervention. And there was a really interesting recent article on the Medscape website, which a lot of doctors use for educational purposes. And they said if exercise was a drug, everybody would be prescribed it. Why? Because it's anti-cancer. So again, same thing. If you're doing nothing at the moment, then just start walking. If you're already walking, then just make it a power walk. If you're already doing that, make it a run. Do some weights, do some kettlebell exercise, do a bit of yoga. Just move. Yeah, and that's going to be anti-cancer. So it's really basic, simple stuff, but it's not to be underestimated. And those are foundations. You can think about supplements and you can think about really exciting, exotic stuff, but actually the foundations have to be sorted out first.
Yes, that's right. And I find this so fascinating because you've given us so many sort of bits of information that can be easily incorporated within our daily lives.
Yeah.
And it's ironic to think that obviously things that we put on our body, especially in the way of deodorants and antiperspirants and perfumes and things like that, can be exhaled because they're all alcohol-based, aluminium-based, as you say, the majority of them as well. So a lot of food for thought. So the website that Dr. Ruqia listeners has advised is the Clean 15 or the Dirty Dozen. That's one thing to have a look at as well. And she's given, if you listen back onto the show, she's given obviously some names of website where you can procure some natural based cosmetics or things to put onto the body as well. So that's very important too. And I think when we look at environmental causes, obviously there's a lot that's going on with regards to electromagnetic waves, internet in the home. Do you get told about that, and is that something that you have to talk about much, or?
I have to admit I don't know enough about it as I would like to, but I am attending a course on it in February, a whole conference on it. What we do know is that some countries have actually postponed their introduction of 5G because of concerns around...
A big concern here in Peterborough at the moment.
Yeah. And I'm glad I'm talking to a counsellor here.
Yeah.
Because we need people who have some influence to actually look at these things and say, hold on, we're not going to experiment on people. And essentially that's what it is. These things are being introduced without any real research behind the impact that they have on human health. And we know they have an impact on human health. I mean, there was a recent study that indicated that when people have their phones in their bedrooms, even if those phones are silent and perhaps put away from the bed, people don't sleep as well. If they put the phone outside the room, people sleep better.
Wow.
And that's not people looking at their phones all night. That's just having it in the room.
I'm just thinking about how addicted I am to my phone. And if it was to be outside the room, I don't think I'd get a wink of sleep, but that's just besides the point.
Maybe for the first few nights, and then you'd find,
Yeah, but you're right.
Yeah.
That's a very valid point, obviously, because of the electromagnetic sort of energy or whatever it
radiation,
is that it gives off.
Yeah.
It would be fascinating to see what comes out of this course that you talk about.
I'd be happy to come back and talk about it again.
I will definitely call you back as well. So the other thing that we spoke about, obviously, in the break, and this is nuggets of information that I'm giving to the listeners, so I hope that the listeners are going to take from this, is vegetables. Now, you spoke about the fact that we often have set vegetables, and obviously within an Asian demographic, we all love our potatoes. Somebody will cook a meat curry, the children would have the potatoes, they won't have the meat or the chicken or whatever. We want the potato. So how would you suggest, obviously, incorporating more vegetables? Like you say, you've obviously implemented that as well.
Yeah, well, I'm trying. This is something I admit I'm bad at. And I think I'm very good at cutting out the foods I shouldn't be having. It's much harder to put in the foods I should be having because it takes time, or at least you have to think about it and plan ahead in order to get the vegetables in. But I think, as you were saying before the break, getting things or habits established early is key. And particularly with children, if you can get them onto vegetables as soon as they are weaned, they're going to be open to experimenting and eating new foods and trying new vegetables as they get older.
Sure.
If they're not introduced to vegetables early on, it becomes much, much more difficult. And I know in my family, one of my nieces just won't touch any vegetables. And she has, a number of different concerns and issues, and she needs to be eating them. But it's so difficult now that she is 3 to introduce them to her. So introducing them early on to children is really important. And often people will say, well, they don't like it. They won't. They say you have to, exactly. But also they say that you have to be introduced to your food about around 15 times before you actually develop a taste for it and want it. So you have to persist a little bit. Variety is important, again, and finding some that they do like. Color, kids will love color, so introducing color into their diet is important. Generally, I would say, again, it's about doing things gradually. If you're trying to do too much at once, it's not going to work. And we know the government recommendations, I think, are still 5 to 7 portions of vegetables. Where I'm training, they say 10 portions a day. Vegetables.
Well, yes, they would, wouldn't they?
They would.
The College of Naturopathic Medicine, you've got to eat your vegetables.
But the thing is, if you're not eating any at the moment, that's really not going to be
not helpful,
realistic. It's not going to be realistic. What you need to do is start off with 1 a day. Then increase it. Well, I've got this. Increase it to 2 a day and just build up slowly. But aim for a variety of different vegetables. Don't go for the same one every single day, because as I was saying again earlier, I was saying that different color vegetables indicate different phytonutrient spectrum within that vegetable, and we need the whole spectrum in order to maintain health. So you want to get as much color into your diet as you can. And it's really interesting because one of the words or phrases that you use for the processed diet is the white diet, because it's just white flour, bread, rice, pasta. It just looks boring and bland.
Yes.
The vegetables are colorful and vibrant, and that's what you want on your plate. You want a rainbow on your plate.
Yes.
So just start. If at the moment you're having nothing, maybe you even have to start with 1 a week.
Yes.
But be consistent with that 1 a week, and then build it up to 2, and then 3, and then, inshallah, at some point you're going to be like, well, this isn't so difficult. And actually, a lot of recipes will use more than 1 vegetable in there, particularly salads, for example.
Yes.
So it's not that difficult. It just takes a bit of planning. And I think that's probably the hardest part.
Yeah.
So set yourself some time to plan what I'm going to eat for the next week, and then shop accordingly, and then actually eat it and enjoy it.
That's amazing. And looking at, we've now got 1.5 minutes left until we close the show, but obviously just on the back of that, it gives me, I'd say this, no pun intended, food for thought. Food for thought that there are so many fussy eaters in the way of children as well who present to us. And I have mothers who cry because they know that they've had such fussy eaters who they've brought up and now go to school, and they know they're going to pick them up, and that child is going to starve at school because they won't eat vegetables. So you're absolutely right that this, and like Dr. Ruqia said, that it's so important to try and introduce vegetables as soon as the child is being weaned. So it's obviously about giving them a choice as well. And Dr. Ruqia, I'm so grateful that you have come today.
I'm really happy to have been here. It's really interesting to just talk to you.
There's such a wealth of information that you have given, and I'd love to share some of those websites, etc., that you have given to the listeners. And hopefully, inshallah, when you do complete the next course that you are going to complete on electromagnetism and what the influence it has on health, I would definitely, inshallah, call you back again.
I'd love to be back.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much. And that was Dr. Ruqia Zafar, who has given us such a fascinating insight, and I'll be thinking about this for ages and ages and ages. Now, we do have some announcements here to make. Sue Ryder Thorpe Hall Hospice, Sunday the 15th of December, Lights of Love, Peterborough Cathedral, seeking a headline sponsor, so please call 01733 225 940, festive reading and carols. And I hope you can join me again next time when Dr. Shabina joins you on the Body, Health and Mind Show. Assalamu alaikum.
Stay tuned to Salam Radio after this short ad break.